everybody, I'm Mike the Gamer Guy, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about another very interesting subject. This one actually inspired by the comment section on my previous video addressing bootleg misconceptions. This is inspired by a comment left by the user GlitterJugEnd, where they did just a wonderful job of pointing out that a lot of people erroneously group all manner of games under the heading bootleg. And it's a really well-written comment, and I suggest all of you go and check that out at the conclusion of this video. But first, let's get right into it. Today I'm going to be focusing on the Famicom/NES library of games, as the sheer volume of the titles for these systems allows for a lot of nuance to be had. Let's first begin off with the two broadest forms of game classification: licensed and unlicensed games. Licensed games are the set of all games for which the console manufacturer, in this case Nintendo, has given their blessing to be released on the system. In terms of the US NES library, you can be pretty sure it's a licensed game if it has the Nintendo seal of quality on it. Though, this isn't always so. In the case of Donkey Kong Classics, for example, the seal is missing, but this is also a licensed game. There are essentially three classes of licensed games: first-party, second-party, and third-party games. First-party games are often considered the heavy hitters of Nintendo consoles. These are titles developed in-house and can make use of Nintendo's intellectual property. For example, games like Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3. These are two examples of games developed by Nintendo R&D 4, or Research and Development 4, whereas something like, say, Star Tropics and Punch-Out were games developed by Nintendo R&D 3. They're still considered first-party, though, because they were developed in-house. That is to say, they were still developed by Nintendo. The second party is a little trickier to define, and to my knowledge has only started being used as of recent to subdivide what was thought as first party. Basically, a second party developer is a company with ties to the console manufacturer, and who may use the company's IP, but which is also its own separate entity from the company. One example might be HAL Laboratories, who developed the fantastic Kirby's Adventure. But to be honest, the most well-known example is the Super Nintendo N64 era Rare. That's sort of outside of the purview of today's video. Lastly, third-party games comprise the rest of licensed games which are neither first or second party. I'm sure you can all think of classic examples of these. You got Capcom, Konami, Taito, Hudson Soft. I mean, the list goes on forever. Unlicensed games are where things get much more interesting. First off, an important distinction. All bootlegs are unlicensed, but not all unlicensed games are bootlegs. Take for example Camerica, one of my favorite unlicensed developers. Despite having released a large wealth of games, and even an entire add-on which takes its own proprietary type of cartridges, the Aladdin Deck Enhancer, they never actually have infringed on anyone's IP, and therefore you can't really consider this a bootleg. The more well-known example of unlicensed developers on the NES, though, is probably Tengen, who, despite not having a license to release games from Nintendo, did an excellent job of handling IPs officially from Namco, such as Pac-Mania, Sega, such as Afterburner, and many more. Of course, there is the whole issue of Tengen's infamous version of Tetris, but that whole issue, which is actually far more complicated than I originally knew, is probably better for another time. The main point is that non-copyright infringing unlicensed games exist, and they're totally on the up and up, even if they exist somewhat on the periphery of 8-bit Nintendo gaming. Pirated games, as you have probably gathered, are the set of unlicensed games that do infringe upon a company's copyright. But there are distinct subsets here worth distinguishing. For starters, you have the simplest and least interesting form, which are simply just official games that were stolen and sold by a pirate distributor. These games feature no noteworthy differences from their official counterparts, aside from possibly weird cover artwork and removed copyright information. Next you have what are referred to as graphical hacks. These games are exemplified by the infamous Super Mario's 4 through 16. Here, a game is bootlegged but has some or all of its graphical content altered. These can manifest in all manner of ways, but Mario and Pokemon are particularly popular subjects for graphics hacks. It's worth noting that graphical hacks aren't technically exclusive to bootlegs, they're just more prevalent there. In fact, first-party developers occasionally do graphical hacks, as can be evidenced by Super Mario Bros. 2 and its Japanese counterpart, Super Mario USA. Both of the aforementioned categories are considered to be, in general, less interesting than the last two. pirate originals and pirate original ports. This is where on my channel I like to spend most of my time. Pirate originals are games which make use of another company's IP without authorization, which are essentially programmed from the ground up. Titanic, a game based on James Cameron's movie of the nearly same name, is one example of a pirate original not being based on another video game series, whereas Kart Fighter would be an example of a pirate original which is. Pirate original ports are a subset of pirate originals, but are definitely worth noting as a separate entity, I think. I've talked about a ton of these in the past: Somari, Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country 4. Almost universally, with the exclusion of perhaps some nice code games to my knowledge, these are usually what are referred to as demakes. That meaning games which were initially released on more powerful hardware and then ported backwards to the Famicom. Lastly, how about a few extra bits? Repros or reproduction carts are a somewhat controversial topic. For those of you who don't know, these are often brand new, made-to-order carts of unreleased, ROM hack, and even officially released games. The biggest distinction between these and what are traditionally thought of as pirate games are their proliferation and their method of release. Repos, it seems, are much more related to and directed at the gaming hobby than straight-up pirates. But to be completely honest, repos, aside from a few key examples, fall into the same legal category as bootlegs. One of those examples is the soon-to-be-released Dream World Pogi, which was the subject of a recent Kickstarter. In this case, the original developers are actually responsible for bringing this lost title back to life in the form of an NES cartridge. So this falls more or less under the standard unlicensed banner. I hope to look at this one in greater detail when it's released. Also of note, this game was originally supposed to come out on the Aladdin Deck Enhancer, which we'll also be looking at a future date. It's also worth noting that in the realm of bootleg games, there are bootleg games, such as the pirate original Aladdin. This cartridge I have is not an original Aladdin release. This is a cartridge pirated from the original pirate distributor, the JY Company. So there are many layers to this. There are bootlegs on top of bootlegs. Lastly, you have multi-carts. Of course, we looked at some last time, and a lot of these do fall firmly into the realm of bootleg. But that's not always the case. You have, of course, the ones that came out during the NES's lifetime, such as Donkey Kong Classics, which was a first-party multi-cart. But then you have more recent stuff, such as the Wisdom Tree Video Game Collection, which was another Kickstarter project, and we'll have to look at this in the future too. But again, this is a collection of games that was released by the original publisher. So there you have it. I think that pretty much wraps up this whole topic. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below. And I hope to see you next week as we move into week 4 of Mike the Gamer Guy weekly videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you next time.